Zhuangzi. Chapter I. Transcendental Bliss. Argument. Space infinite. Time infinite. Relativity of magnitudes. Physical and moral. The magnitude absolute. Usefulness as a test of value. The usefulness of the useless. In the Northern Ocean, there is a fish called the Leviathan, many thousand li in size. This Leviathan changes into a bird called the Roc, whose back is many thousand li in breadth. With a mighty effort it rises, and its wings obscure the sky like clouds. At the equinox, this bird prepares to start for the Southern Ocean, the Celestial Lake. And in the Record of Marvels, we read that when the rock flies southwards, the water is smitten for a space of 3,000 li around, while the bird itself mounts upon a typhoon to a height of 90,000 li, for a flight of 6 months' duration, just so are the motes in a sunbeam blown aloft by God. For whether the blue of the sky is its real color, or only the result of distance without end, the effect to the bird looking down would be just the same as to the motes, distance being relative. The rock at an altitude of 90,000 li, 3 li to a mile, is no more than a mote in a sunbeam a few feet from the ground. If there is not sufficient depth, water will not float large ships. Upset a cupful into a small hole, and a mustard seed will be your boat. Try to float the cup, and it will stick. From the disproportion between water and vessel, so with air. If there is not a sufficient depth, it cannot support large birds. And for this bird, a depth of 90,000 li is necessary. And then, with nothing save the clear sky above, and no obstacle in the way, it starts upon its journey to the south. A cicada laughed, and said to a young dove, "Now, when I fly with all my might, 'tis as much as I can do to get from tree to tree. And sometimes I do not reach, but fall to the ground midway. What then can be the use of going up 90,000 li, in order to start for the south? He who goes to Mangsang, a short distance into the country, taking 3 meals with him, comes back with his stomach as full as when he started. But he who travels 100 li must grind flour enough for a night's halt. And he who travels 1,000 li must supply himself with provisions for 3 months. Those 2 little creatures, what should they know? Small knowledge has not the compass of great knowledge, any more than a short year has the length of a long year. How can we tell that this is so? The mushroom of a morning knows not the alternation of day and night. The chrysalis knows not the alternation of spring and autumn. There's a short years, but in the state of Chu, there is a tortoise whose spring and autumn are each of 500 years duration. And in former days, there was a large tree which had a spring and autumn each of 8,000 years duration. Yet, Piang-tzu, the Methuselah of China, his age has not been agreed upon by Chinese writers, but the lowest computation gives him a life of 800 years, is still, alas, an object of envy to all. It was on this very subject that the Emperor Tong, BC 1766, spoke to Qi as follows. At the barren north there is a great sea, the celestial lake. In it there is a fish, several thousand li in breadth, and I know not how many in length. It is called the Leviathan. There is also a bird, called the Rock, with a back like Mount Tai, China's most famous mountain, situated in the province of Shanting, and wings like clouds across the sky. Upon a typhoon it soars up to a height of 90,000 li. Beyond the clouds an atmosphere, with only the clear sky above it. And then it directs its flight towards the South Pole. A quail laughed and said, "Pray, what may that creature be going to do?" I rise but a few yards in the air, and settle again after flying around among the reeds. That is the most I can manage. Now, wherever can this creature be going to? The repetition of this story, coupled with its quotation from the Record of Marvels, is considered to give an air of authenticity to Zhuangzi's illustration, which the reader might otherwise suppose to be of his own invention. Such, indeed, is the difference between small and great. Take, for instance, a man who creditably fills some small office, or who is a pattern of virtue in his neighborhood, or who influences his prince to right government of the state. His opinion of himself will be much the same as that quail's. The philosopher Jung laughs at such a one. He, if the whole world flattered him, would not be affected thereby, nor if the whole world blamed him, would he lose his faith in himself. For Jung can distinguish between the intrinsic and the extrinsic, between honor and shame, and such men are rare in their generation. But even he has not established himself beyond the limits of an external world. His achievements are after all only of the earth. Earthy. There was Li Tzu again, a personage of whom nothing is really known. He is considered by the best authorities to have been of Zhuangzi's own creation. This, however, did not prevent some enterprising scholar, probably of the Han dynasty, from discovering a treatise which still passes under Li Tzu's name. He could ride upon the wind and travel whithersoever he wished, staying away as long as 15 days. Among mortals who attain happiness, such a man is rare. Yet although Li Tzu was able to dispense with walking, he was still dependent upon something. The wind. But had he been charioted upon the eternal fitness of heaven and earth, driving before him the elements, as his team, while roaming through the realms of forever, upon what, then, would he have had to depend? That is, nourished upon the doctrines of inaction, the continuity of life and death, etc., which will be dealt with in later chapters. Thus it has been said, the perfect man ignores self, the divine man ignores action, the true sage ignores reputation. His for the three are one is a bliss, beyond all that the minstrel has told. Material existences melt into thin air. Worldly joys and sorrows cease for him, who passes thus into the everlasting enjoyment of a transcendental peace. The Emperor Yao, BC 2356. His reign, coupled with that of Shun, who succeeded him, may be regarded as the golden age of China's history. See page 8. Wished to abdicate in favor of Xiaoyao, a worthy hermit, saying, "If, when the sun and moon are shining, you persist in lighting a torch, is not that a misapplication of fire? If, when the rainy season is at its height, you still continue to water the ground, is not this a waste of labor? Now, sir, do you assume the reins of government, and the empire will be at peace? I am but a dead body, conscious of my own deficiency. I beg you will ascend the throne. Ever since you, sire, have directed the administration," replied Xiaoyao, "the empire has enjoyed tranquility. Supposing, therefore, that I were to take your place now, should I gain any reputation thereby? Besides, reputation is but the shadow of reality, and should I trouble myself about the shadow? The tit, building its nest in the mighty forest, occupies but a single twig. The tapir slakes its thirst from the river, but drinks enough only to fill its belly. To you, sire, belongs the reputation. The empire has no need for me. If a cook is unable to dress his funeral sacrifices, the boy who impersonates the corpse may not step over the wines and meats and do it for him. This illustrates rejection of reputation by the true sage. CCHV. Chen Wu said to Lin Shu, both fictitious personages. I heard Qi Yu utter something unjustifiably extravagant, and without either rhyme or reason. This was an individual, named Lu Tong, who feigned madness in order to escape an official career. For his interview with Confucius, CCH, IV, Fin. I was greatly startled at what he said, for it seemed to me boundless as the Milky Way, though very improbable and removed from the experiences of mortals. What was it? Asked Lin Shu. He declared, replied Chen Wu, that's on the Miaokusha mountain, which is as fabulous as the story. There lives a divine man whose flesh is like ice or snow, whose demeanor is that of a virgin, who eats no fruit of the earth, but lives on air and dew, and who, riding on clouds with flying dragons for his team, roams beyond the limits of mortality. This being is absolutely inert, yet he wards off corruption from all things, and causes the crops to thrive. Now I call that nonsense, and do not believe it. Well, answered Lin Shu, you don't ask a blind man's opinion of a picture, nor do you invite a deaf man to a concert. And blindness and deafness are not physical only. There is blindness and deafness of the mind, diseases from which I fear you yourself are suffering. The good influence of that man fills all creation. Yet because a paltry generation cries for reform, you would have him condescend to the details of an empire, not seeing that the greater contains the less. Objective existences cannot harm him. In a flood which reached to the sky, he would not be drowned. In a drought, though metals ran liquid and mountains were scorched up, he would not be hot. Out of his very dust and siftings you might fashion to such men as Xiao and Shun, and you would have him occupy himself with objectives. illustrating the inaction of the divine man. A man of the Sung state carried some sacrificial caps into the Yu state for sale. But the men of Yu used to cut off their hair and paint their bodies, so that they had no use for such things. And so, when the Emperor Yao, the ruler of all under heaven and pacificator of all within the shores of ocean, paid a visit to the 4 sages of the Miaokusha mountain, on returning to his capital at Funyang, the empire existed for him no more. This illustrates the rejection of self by the perfect man. Yao had his eyes open to the hollowness and uselessness of all mortal possessions. He ceased, therefore, to think any more of himself, and per consequence of the empire, who it is he, a celebrated schoolman, contemporary with and antagonistic to Zhuangzi, for an account of his theories, said to Zhuangzi, "The Prince of Wei gave me a seed of a large-sized kind of gourd. I planted it, and it bore a fruit as big as a 5-bushel measure. Now had I used this for holding liquids, it would have been too heavy to lift. And had I cut it in half 4 ladles, the ladles would have been ill-adapted for such purpose. It was uselessly large, so I broke it up." "Sir," replied Zhuangzi, "it was rather you who did not know how to use large things. There was a man of Sung who had a recipe for salve for chapped hands, his family having been silk washers for generations. Well, a stranger who had heard of it came and offered him 100 ounces of silver for this recipe. Whereupon he called together his clansmen and said, 'We have never made much money by silk washing. Now, we can make 100 ounces in a single day. Let the stranger have the recipe.' So the stranger got it, and went and informed the Prince of Wu, who was just then at war with the Yu state. Accordingly, the prince used it in a naval battle fought at the beginning of winter with the Yu state, the result being that the latter was totally defeated. They suffered from chapped hands, while their rivals of the Wu state were protected by their patent salve. The stranger was rewarded with territory and a title. Thus, while the efficacy of the salve to cure chapped hands was in both cases the same, its application was different. Here, it secured a title. There, a capacity for washing silk. Now as to your 5-bushel gourd. Why did you not make a boat of it, and float about over river and lake? You could not then have complained of its not holding anything. But I fear you are rather woolly inside, like it. This, of course, is a sneer. Huitzu could not see that the greatness of a thing depends upon the greatness of its application. Huitzu said to Zhuangzi, "Sir, I have a large tree, of a worthless kind. Its trunk is so irregular and knotty that it cannot be measured out for planks, while its branches are so twisted as to admit of no geometrical subdivision whatever. It stands by the roadside, but no carpenter will look at it. And your words, sir, are like that tree, big and useless, not wanted by anybody." "Sir," rejoined Zhuangzi, "have you never seen a wild cat crouching down in wait for its prey? Right and left it springs from bough to bough, high and low alike, until perchance it gets caught in a trap or dies in a snare. On the other hand, there is the yak with its great huge body. It is big enough in all conscience, but it cannot catch mice. The adaptability of a thing is ofttimes its bane. The inability of the yak to catch mice saves it from the snare, which is fatal to the wildcat. Now if you have a big tree, and are at a loss what to do with it, why not plant it in the domain of non-existence, beyond the limits of our external world, referring to the conditions of mental abstraction, in which alone true happiness is to be found, whither ye might betake yourself to inaction by its side, to blissful repose beneath its shade. Why does the horizon hold me fast, with my joy and grief in this center? Emerson. There it would be safe from the axe, and from all other injury. For being of no use to others, itself would be free from harm. Illustrating the advantage of being useless, that which is small and useful is thus shown to be inferior to that which is large and useless,